their money on this. Their concern is they want to make sure that they're not going to be losing that much money. Again, it's a lot of money for this community. They don't have much.
Rocco, you want to put Rocco on mute?
And they've been.
There we go. All right, everybody. Good morning. Happy Friday. I'd like to call the meeting of the Transportation Committee to order. I'll ask that Kama read the names of members that are signed in and ask for any other committee members that we might have missed. So I'll turn over to Kama.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Right now I've got Brian Carlson representing IDOT District 1, yourself representing DuPage County, Christina Kupkowski representing Will County, Dave Seglin representing CDOT, Doug Ferguson representing CMAP, Emily Doucher representing McHenry County, Eric Llewellyn representing PACE, Jackie Forbes representing Kendall County, Jessica Hector Sue representing the RTA, Jessica Ortega representing the Bike Ped Task Force, John Donovan from FHWA, Kevin Carrier representing Lake County, Mayor Rockingham representing the Council of Mayors, Dave Kralik representing Metro, Rocco Zucchero representing the Tollway, Tara Orban representing Cook County, and Tom Rickert representing Kane County. And I'm sure others have jumped on while I was reading that list. I see Heidi from CNT, so let me get her into the member room. So if I missed anybody else, go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know.
Is there anybody that was missed? Hearing none? All right.
Yes,
thank you.
There was one that was missed. Jeremy Glover representing, and I'm promoting him right now.
All right. Okay.
Running MPC.
Okay. All right. Are there any agenda changes?
No, there are not.
Okay. Then we'll move on to announcements. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Heidi Prasad. She's joining the committee as representing CNT. Some of you may remember Heidi did spend some time with CMAP. So if Heidi is out there and wants to turn her camera on and wave to everybody, I assume she brought donuts. Is every
Hi,
new
everyone.
committee?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I think it's saying there's not enough space for another video
Okay.
option. But good morning, everyone, and thank you. Good to see everyone again.
Good. Well, welcome. Welcome aboard. Just a couple of housekeeping items for today's meeting. We go through these the last meeting as well. It is being recorded, the meeting. Make sure when you logged in that you use your full name. Attendees, audience attendees will be on mute. Committee members will be able to mute and unmute. Hey, Heidi, there you are. Unmute yourselves. If you're calling in, instead of through your computer, if you're calling in, to mute and unmute yourself would be *6. If you are having issues, feel free to use the question box or the chat box if it's out there. And we do ask committee members when making a motion or seconding a motion to include your name so it can be recorded so we know who made that motion or second. And then during a vote, if you are voting no, again, just simply state your name so that we know who voted no. So with that, I'll move on to approval of the minutes from April 30th. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mayor Rockingham, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a second?
Tom Rickert seconds.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any comments or changes to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I think I got them all. Any opposed? Say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. We'll go on to committee reports. I was unable to attend the coordinating committee, so Jessica attended on my behalf. So Jessica, if you want to give the update.
Sure thing. Thanks, Chris.
So the coordinating committee met virtually on May 13th. During the meeting, CMAP staff shared the work that they've been doing during the pandemic to support particularly municipal partners, but also other stakeholders with data resources, with some capacity building activities, and for some advice on how to use different elements of Onto 2050 as a guidebook, both to kind of navigate the pandemic and hopefully plan to recover from it. Chairman Beal facilitated a discussion among the committee members about the impacts of the pandemic on their various industries and how CMAP can be helpful during this time. Some of the ideas that were discussed by the group included mobilizing groups of smaller communities to band together to access resources that might otherwise not be available to them and only be available to larger cities. They also talked about pushing broader policy goals of Onto 2050, like congestion pricing, that might be more politically palatable right now. I mentioned that in particular on the transportation side, and then surveying communities about their needs and providing more technical assistance in areas of greatest demand. So that's that. Back to Chris.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. Are there any questions of Jessica? I'll put her on the spot. All right, hearing none. We'll move on to agenda item 5. Russell will provide an overview of the FY 19-24 TIP amendments. So I'll turn it over to Russell.
All right, thank you. Included in your packet today is a memo with information regarding the 118 formal TIP changes contained in TIP Amendment 20-05. There's also 148 administrative modifications in TIP Amendments 20-05.1 and 20.05-2. TIP changes, and those are the TIP changes that the staff reviewed. Of the 118 formal changes, 95 are from new projects being added to the TIP. 13 are for cost changes above our administrative thresholds, and 10 are for project phases that were either added or removed from the TIP. The net result is that formal changes increase the total cost of projects in the TIP by more than $156 million. The formal amendment was posted on May 15th for committee review and public comment. Administrative amendments 20-05.1 and 20-05.2 were posted for information and resulted in an increase of just over $35 million in total project cost. At this time, staff requests approval of the TIP amendment 20-05 as presented. And if there are any questions, I can answer them at this time.
Okay, first we'll entertain a motion to approve the TIP amendment 2005.
So moved.
Remember to unmute.
Second.
Is that Dave, you made the motion?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Tara Orban, I'll second.
Thank you, Tara. Are there any questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by voting aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, Russell. Next item, TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment, item number 5.2.
Okay, also included in your packet today is the Onto 2050 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment 20-06. As you know, the CMAP region is in a non-attainment area for ozone. Thus, we are required to demonstrate that projects in the TIP conform to the motor vehicle emissions budget for our region through a regional emissions analysis of transportation projects in the TIP. Specifically, projects in the TIP subject to air quality analysis requirements demonstrate, when modeled, that the region does not exceed our motor vehicle emissions budget, which is shown on the last page of the memo in your packet. The memo also includes information about new projects now included in the regional air quality analysis, along with various changes to existing projects that are part of the regional air quality analysis. The memo and the list of projects that are new or had changes were subject to a 30-day public comment period from April 10th to May 11th, during which time CMAP did not receive any public comments. So our analysis demonstrates that the semi-annual Onto 2050 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendments are found to conform to the motor vehicle emissions budget for our region. Staff requests that committee recommend approval of the semi-annual Onto 2050 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment 20-06 to the CMAP board and MPO policy committee as presented. If there are any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, first I'll entertain a motion to approve the conformity tip amendment 20-06.
Tom
Jessica,
Rickard,
I'll
I'll
motion.
make the motion to approve.
Okay, Tom, got you for the motion. Is there a second?
This is Kevin Carrier. I'll second.
Okay, Kevin, thank you. Are there any questions of Russ? Hearing none, all those in favor vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the item carries. Moving on to item 6.0, on to 24 regionally significant project plan amendments. Jane, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jane Grover, Principal for Public Engagement, CMAP. To summarize, there's a memo in your packets, committee members, summarizing the public comment for the proposed amendments to onto 2050 for regionally significant projects. And for the meeting record, those are I-55 at Airport Lockport Roads and Illinois 126, and on Illinois 55 from I-90 to US 52 and US 52 from River Road to Hobart Road. We received over the course of the mandatory 30-day public comment period, which was conducted entirely virtually, 8 formal public comments, which are attached to the memo itself. We thank everyone who contributed their thoughtful comments and took the time to do it, to comment on these 2 proposed amendments to onto 2050. So thank you very much. If you want to read the comments themselves, there are so few, we were able to attach them and provide them to you in the packet. The memo also includes a summary, our summary of those comments.
All right, Jane, thank you for that update. And again, the items were in the packet, both the summary and the detailed comments. Are there any questions of Jane regarding those comments? Okay.
I have a
Hearing
question,
none.
actually. This is Jeremy from NPC.
Okay.
NPC, we didn't quite get our act together in time to make a comment. Sorry about that. But I did want to echo one of the things that CNT commented about the lack of modeling on emissions impacts for these 2 projects. And I'm just wondering if that is something that CMAP is thinking about or has the capacity to model in greater detail for regionally significant projects, just because I really do agree with them that seems like a really critical piece of information for us to have in order to support a project.
To my understanding, I'll just, and I'll turn over to CMAP, that the comments have been received and both IDOT is aware of them as well as CMAP are looking at them, and I believe that they are working to develop responses. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah. Say yes.
Yes?
Hold on. Hold on. Say yes. Let's see.
Jeremy, this is Jesse from CMAP. Yeah, we are working to develop comments or develop responses to those comments. We will be incorporating responses as needed in our staff recommendation to the board and the NPO.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Jeremy. We'll go on to agenda item 6.2. That would be the TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment 20-03-1. And I'll turn it back. Boy, Russ, you've been on the hot seat, so I'll turn it over to Russell.
Yeah, here. All right. Also included in your packet today is the conformity analysis for the 2 regionally significant projects contained in CMAP in the TIP amendment 20-03.1. As you know, the CMAP region is in a non-attainment area for ozone. And as I mentioned before, so that means that we're required to conform to our motor vehicle emissions budget for the area. As has already been mentioned, today's projects in the TIP subject to air quality analysis requirements must demonstrate when modeled that the region does not exceed our motor vehicle emissions budget. That is shown on the last page of the memo in your packet. I want to mention that the analysis for the two regionally significant projects includes all the changes in the previous conformity memo 20-06 that we just approved about 5 minutes ago. We do the analysis of the TIP conformity amendments, and then we take those results and incorporate them into the analysis we did for the two plan amendments, so that our analysis is done using the most current TIP information. The memo shown in your packet was subject to a 30-day public comment period, again from April 10th to May 11th, during which time CMAP did not receive any comments on the conformity memo. Our analysis demonstrates that the semi-annual onto 2050 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendments 20-03.1 are found to conform to the motor vehicle emissions budget for our region. Staff requests the committee recommend approval of the onto 2050 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment 20-03.1 to the CMAP board and MPO policy committee as presented. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any at this time.
Well, first I'll entertain a motion to approve TIP amendment 20-03.1. Do I have a motion?
This is Jessica.
This is Mayor Rocky.
I'll
I'll make the motion.
All right, I didn't get I heard a motion. I don't know who made it.
Mayor Rockingham.
Oh, okay, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you. Is there a second?
Jessica Hector, Stewart RTA, no second.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Are there any questions? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by voting aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 7.0. This is an informational item. STP programming update. Kama, turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Staff just wanted to give everybody a quick update today on how the STP programs are progressing in the region. We're now about 7 months into the first year of the 2020 to 2024 Shared Fund Program, and project sponsors are actively working to implement their projects in a timely manner. To date, about $15.5 million has been transferred from Federal Highway to FTA for two projects being led by Metra and CTA. Those funds are expected to be obligated within FTA grants soon, in the next month or so. An additional $900,000 is also expected to be transferred to FTA by September for an additional CTA project. On the highway side, as of the March status updates, agreements for $2.8 million are currently under review at IDOT, and the remaining $21 million are expected to be submitted for IDOT review by the end of this month. A few adjustments have been made to the program through our active program management policies. We've made cost adjustments granted by staff for 4 project phases in both FY20 and 21. We have gotten requests to extend obligation deadlines by 6 months from the end of September to next March, and those have been granted. One request to reprogram an active project to the contingency program due to schedule uncertainties has also been granted. And as a result of that, one project phase was moved from the contingency program to the active program and awarded partial funding. This phase was the highest ranked contingency project seeking funding in FY20. Program status reports, which provide the individual project status information, are available on the CMAP STP webpage if anybody's interested in seeing the status of the individual projects. We're also about 6 months away from the next call for the FY22 to 2026 Shared Fund project, which of course will be conducted along with the CMAC and TAP call. The STP Project Selection Committee has been discussing the lessons that we learned from the first call. Back in January, staff did propose adding bike ped projects as an eligible project type for the shared fund in the next call, as well as exploring other project types for future calls. Staff has been working to develop evaluation criteria for bike-tied projects for further discussion by the project selection committee, along with the other lessons learned topics. We did postpone the April project selection committee meeting, and over the next week or so, we're going to be working with members to reschedule that meeting, as well as considering adding some additional meetings to facilitate remote discussions. On the local side, the sub-regional councils in the city of Chicago are currently evaluating project applications for their calls for federal fiscal year 21 to 2025 local STP programs. In June and July, those programs will be available for public comments. Each council is on a slightly different schedule. So the specific dates for each council, as well as their draft programs, will be posted on their individual websites, as well as on CMAP's STP webpage. I know that the councils, as well as the city, would very much appreciate not only comments from you guys, but also your assistance in spreading the word about those comment periods when they do open up. Just as a reminder, this committee will take action on these programs as part of TIP amendment approvals this fall. Regarding the current local program, roughly $100 million has been authorized this fiscal year. All of the remaining local STP funds for FFY 2020 are programmed on project phases that are on track at this time to receive federal authorization in FY 20. We do not anticipate there being any unused STP funds at the end of the year. Regardless, if there were any local funds left, those would not carry over to FY 21. So unless there are questions about the STP programs, I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, that was all I had.
Thank
Cameron,
you,
this is
Cam.
Dave Seglin.
Go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, I have a question. And I apologize because I missed what you said about the contingency program within the shared fund.
Sure.
You said some action had been taken.
Yes. So as part of the following the March status updates, in April, we asked project sponsors to let us know if they needed to request a 6-month extension of their obligation deadline, which would be September 30th, or if they felt that they could not make that extended deadline, did they want to be reprogrammed from the active program to the contingency program? The other option, there were 3 options. You could also proceed at your own risk. Nobody chose that option. So we did have one project, which is sponsored by the Village of Countryside. They requested to move their project to the contingency program because they felt that there was some uncertainty in their schedule because that's a joint project with IDOT. That freed up $900 million in the active program. So per the active program management rules, we looked at the status of projects and were able to promote one project, which is the engineering phase for the CTA Harlan Station Bus Bridge, from the contingency program into the active program. So they were the number 18 ranked project overall and 4th highest on the contingency program, but they were the highest ranked project on the contingency program that was seeking funds in FY20 and had reached the status milestones to be able to use those funds within FY20.
And how much money was that?
It was 900,000 and change.
Because I thought you said 900 million.
Yeah.
And I was gonna be like, that's just fund everything. Well, I guess I misunderstood.
900,000.
I guess I misunderstood how the contingency program worked because I thought that the funding would always go to the number 1 project, which is a City of Chicago project. But you're saying that's not the case.
Sorry. So that project is seeking funding in FY22. So these are FY20 funds. So those funds have to be spent in FY20. Therefore, they go to the first project, highest ranked project seeking funding within this year that they're available.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Kama. Thank you, David. Are there any other questions of Kama? Try to figure out how, I want to see how you write your checks. 900,000, 900 million. What's a zero, right? It's nothing.
What's a tax?
So thank you, Kama.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over now. Agenda item 8, regional climate planning. Jared, I'll turn it over to Jared and Edith. They'll give a presentation on planning being done for regional climate action plan. So turn it over to Edith or Jared.
Morning, everybody. I'm Edith Macra, Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I'm the Environment Director, co-presenting with Jared. And I'll get started with the presentation quickly. I just want to pause on this cover slide because this project, which is a regional climate action plan, is broadly collaborative. And you'll see that Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and CMAP, we're neighbors and friends, we're local, of course. And this project connects up to the Global Covenant of Mayors, which gives us a real opportunity to connect around the world. So Jared, if you would advance for us. So the Global Covenant of Mayors is an organization that was really rooted in the European Union, and there's broad belief that climate action has to occur at the local level. And around the world, there's some 10,000 cities that are part of this Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Action, making substantive steps to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. This is very popular around the world. There are, again, 10,000 cities, 130 countries. And I think, Jared, if you'll just tap, there's only 5 cities that are actually members of the Global Covenant of Mayors as individual cities in the region. And that's the reason for the wanting the partnership. And then kind of coming back to a local level, Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, you know, we're a membership organization of municipalities in the region. We have 275 municipalities. And we created a platform called the Greenest Region Compact to unite cities and towns around sustainability. We've been around for it's 5 years now. We're up to 131 local governments that have pledged. We're up to 4 counties, actually. We're really happy to have McHenry join us recently, but the program is really designed for municipalities to come to consensus on sustainability initiatives. This is the platform that we use then as climate change action became more urgent for cities to take local action. We started to really use this collaborative then to leverage the partnership that we're now in with the Global Covenant of Mayors. So that our region, again, a rather powerful one in terms of population and member municipalities, the caucus approached this partnership through the Global Covenant of Mayors and this international urban cooperation program affiliated with the Global Covenant of the EU was looking to demonstrate that regional climate planning would work and really to try to get the US going on regional collaboration. So we're in this year-long regional and metro scale climate leaders project that provides for us, and Jared, if you would advance, as part of one of these 4 pilot regions, we are offered through the Global Covenant of Mayors, or GCOM as we call it, technical support to comply with Global Covenant of Mayors requirements. It offers us knowledge exchange and learning from these 4 partner regions, which hopefully you can see on the map are Kansas City, which is probably most similar to our region, as well as the Denver and DC metro regions. So we have this knowledge exchange and learning amongst our 4 regions, but we also connect to other regions around the world that we've been able to learn from. The GCOM program has a series of requirements so that all of these 10,000 cities and regions are on the same page. And there's these steps that we have to go through the GCOM commitment. And some of the required steps related to particularly greenhouse gas knowledge and inventory, we're already in really good shape on. So Jared will talk more about that inventory, but learning where our sources of emissions are in the region, and then modeling what it will look like if we continue business as usual, and what sorts of reduction targets in terms of greenhouse gas emissions we could potentially achieve and need to achieve. We also have in place this Greenest Region Compact, which is informing our actions on mitigation. And our first workshop, so as part of the GCOM requirements, we're having 2 workshops for public participation. Mitigation was the first one. We'll talk about that. That was done in October. The second one is related to adaptation. And so what we're working on now is the adaptation side, or what do we do now that climate change impacts are upon us. And we've done some work. We're underway on our climate risk and vulnerability assessment. And then this afternoon at 1 o'clock, please join us. We'll have the first in a series of discussions to help us develop that adaptation portion of the plan, because then coming up in October, 1 year from when we started, we are due to have the climate action plan prepared. And then on an ongoing basis. We, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, will be responsible for utilizing this common reporting framework, as all GCOM members are, to report on our progress. And Jared, I will now turn over to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Edith. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the two research topics that this plan is looking at. The first is mitigation, which means reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the second is adaptation, which means addressing the changes that we can't avoid. So beginning with mitigation, what you see on your screen right now is the high-level overview of our 2015 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And when you look at this, the first thing that jumps out is that we have 3 sectors that each produce roughly a quarter of our region's emissions. Those are residential buildings, commercial and institutional buildings, and on-road transportation, which includes private vehicles like cars and trucks, but also public vehicles like buses and ambulances. The 4th largest sector in our region is manufacturing, which produces 17% of our emissions. That's another really large chunk. And then everything else is fairly small at 4% or less. Before I leave the slide, though, I do want to highlight that railways produce about 1% of our region's emissions, which is pretty impressive because we're a national hub for passenger and freight rail, and we have 2 pretty high capacity commuter systems. For this study, we also broke things down geographically. And here I should point out that we really wanted to make sure we were comparing apples to apples. So we decided to look at the county level and to split the city of Chicago and suburban Cook County out into 2 separate jurisdictions. So where you see Cook Balance, that's just referring to the suburbs in Cook County and not the city of Chicago. So when you break it down this way, we found that suburban Cook County actually produced the most emissions of any jurisdiction in absolute terms, followed by the city of Chicago. The collar counties were a little lower, and Kendall County produced the fewest emissions. And that wasn't a huge surprise. But when we broke it down per capita, we saw something a little more interesting. The big outlier here was Will County, which produced the most emissions in almost every category, but especially for manufacturing. The city of Chicago, on the other hand, was the most efficient, which again wasn't a huge surprise because people in Chicago tend to drive less and have smaller homes and work in smaller offices. Kendall County also showed up as being pretty efficient, but we should highlight that they don't have an interstate highway, which may be a contributing factor. This slide is looking at the change that we saw from 2010 to 2015. During that period, we saw a 7% overall reduction in emissions and an 8.5% reduction at the per capita level, which is great because it says we're not just getting better overall, but we're getting better per person. Below that, there's some information about subsector changes. In the waste sector, we saw the largest percent reduction. There was a 50% reduction between 2010 and 2015, and that was driven mostly by methane capture at landfills, which wasn't very common in 2010, but is ubiquitous today. It should be noted, however, that that's low-hanging fruit that you can only pick once, so it will be hard to sustain that kind of reduction year after year. Buildings saw an 8% reduction during this period. That was driven mostly by a more efficient grid. We were burning less coal and using more natural gas, wind, and solar. And importantly for this committee, transportation remained more or less the same and actually saw a 1% increase. That was driven by vehicle miles being traveled and from off-road transportation like construction and mining equipment. So this chart kind of wraps up our mitigation section by providing an idea of where we're headed. For this project, we're targeting an 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That's the same as onto 2050 and is generally considered to be the minimum reduction that's necessary to avoid the most extreme effects of climate change. It should be noted that an 80% reduction corresponds with a roughly 2 degrees Celsius increase in warming by the end of the century. So some parts of the world would experience severe flooding and heat, but it's generally considered that with continued action in future decades, the global economy would be able to sustain itself. All right, now I'm going to switch gears to the adaptation side because we know that even if we stopped emissions tomorrow, we still have significant changes baked into the system. As Edith mentioned, this is the part of the project we're still on, so we don't have all the answers, but I can walk you through where we've been so far. So the first thing we did was to conduct a pretty comprehensive scan of everything that CMAP has done, and it turns out we've done quite a bit. What you see on your screen are some of the relevant strategy papers and snapshot reports that were created for Onto 2050. But of course, CMAP isn't the only show in town. So we also took a look at some of our local and national partners. We looked at the 3 climate action plans that have been produced for communities in our region, as well as the National Climate Assessment, the Great Lakes Assessment, and several other sustainability plans. And what we found in that review was that extreme heat and flooding were really the most important hazards in our region, both today and in the years to come. After those two hazards, drought was the next most important, followed by severe thunderstorms and severe winter weather, which are not at that same level as flooding and heat, but are still very important and should be addressed in the plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Edith, who's going to speak a little bit more about the Greenest Region Compact and provide some insight as to how that document might shape the final recommendations included in the plan.
So to talk a little bit more about the Greenest Region Compact, again, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, we're a membership organization of municipalities, and of our 275 members, only 3 of them have full-time sustainability staff. So the Greenest Region Compact really brought together municipal thinking and municipal capacity into this consensus document. And so it's a robust, got a robust framework that goes along with it, but what we ask municipalities to do is to formally adopt consensus goals in these 10 categories. And with, you'll see mobility, climate, a lot of, we don't prioritize in this document, but these are the things that municipalities can have impact on. And along with it comes this robust framework, and there are strategies in the framework because of the way we put this together. It was derived from municipal sustainability plans and actions that municipalities can already do, and our small communities or mid-sized communities without sustainability staff. There are a lot of actions in here that bring the climate action down to the level of what a municipality can do without a lot of pain and have impact on. And one of my favorite ones here, it's a high-level GRC strategy, which says reduce emissions from municipal operations. One of the achievable solutions that we found, that was actually an idea brought to us by the US EPA, that brought to our attention the option of using warm mix asphalt versus hot mix asphalt. And it's in the manufacturing process. Most of the plants around here can do it locally, but that just the manufacturing process itself produces 30 to 40% less carbon dioxide and a huge reduction in NOx pollution. And then thanks to our to both IDOT and Tollway Authority for sharing technical expertise and approving the use of this, nearly all municipalities are able to purchase warm mix asphalt if they so choose. And then to show how this connects up to the regional strategies, as Jared just said, that 29% of our emissions come from the transportation sector. And there are other solutions like this, but this is the one that I wanted to particularly show you. And then to zero in further on the framework, this framework it's an optional tool that municipalities can use to achieve GRC goals. So none of the municipalities that formally support the GRC are required to do any of these actions. But if you look at the goal column on the left, what the local governments formally commit to through municipal resolution is these goals. And the goal here is support efficient transportation that uses resources wisely. And this is one page from the framework, but I wanted to highlight for you how these solutions, which are a priority to municipalities, if you'll go back just a second, Jared, priority to municipalities really require regional collaboration. So we use a lot of terminology in here like collaborate for a network of alternate fueling stations, because not everything is in municipal control. And the highlighted ones are the ones that were most important. And Jared, now in that mitigation workshop, the first workshop that we had was in October. We also followed up with a total of 3 outreach events when we looked at these strategies, and Jared presented the greenhouse gas emissions challenges, and then we helped to prioritize what should be done regionally and locally. So the mitigation section, we still have some writing to do, but we have a lot of our strategies together. And as Jared said, we're right now in the thick of the adaptation input, and we'll be doing our workshop instead in a series of webinars, and they do start today at 1 o'clock. I welcome you to join us in that dialogue. We really are seeking input. They will be recorded if you can't make it today, but the next all 4 Saturdays, or excuse me, Fridays, they all blur together now, don't they? We'll be having these climate conversations and seeking input. So again, encourage your participation and support as we develop this really important regional plan. Thank you.
Okay, Edith and Jared, thank you. Question. So when you mentioned transportation, I was going to ask you how, like an asphalt plant, where is that? Is that a point source? So it's in one of the other categories, or was it transportation? So from what I gathered, your response was that is transportation. So it's not just people on the road driving and the like, but it's also construction zones and the materials associated with that industry.
You know, I'd actually have to defer to Jared on that. I think I use that warm mix asphalt because it's one of the areas that we've had some interest in. But I think actually where it gets categorized, Jared, you would know better. I don't actually believe it's transportation, but.
Yeah, exactly right. So right now, the way that we're doing our inventories, that would be included in manufacturing. But we always stress when we're doing these that the way we're measuring it shouldn't necessarily influence the strategies that we're recommending. So even if the manufacturing part doesn't show up in transportation emissions, it's still driven by transportation decisions. And it's worth noting that we're in the process of rethinking what our greenhouse gas emissions inventory might look like in the years to come. 2020 was supposed to be our next reporting year, but I think there's a strong argument to be made that we shouldn't base our next 5 years of decisions on the emissions that were produced this year, because they'll be quite different. So we're going to try to decide how we can possibly put things into different buckets, more useful buckets, or if it just makes sense to stick with what we have now. But you're exactly right. The industrial processes wouldn't show up in transportation as it's currently structured.
Okay. All right.
I had a question too,
Are there any
Chris.
other questions? Yeah, David.
Yeah, also about hot mix versus warm mix asphalt. And actually, I don't know the answer to this. I'm not an engineer. Maybe Chris, you know, but switching from a hot mix to a warm mix, does that in any way degrade the quality of the asphalt? Because any improvements we make in CO2 and NOx by switching to a warm mix, we could lose if we have to go out and repave that street earlier than we would have otherwise.
Sure. And I will answer that as best as I can. I'm not an engineer either, but through our environment committee, when we try to engage experts and bring them to educate our mayors, we actually, IDOT hosted an environment committee meeting for us when they shared their standards. They've done a lot of analysis on the longevity and the quality of the warm mix asphalt. They actually found that there is a slightly longer life to the material. It's mostly, I think the processes are, they have to do with the fluidity and the packability of it. I'm not using the right terminology for that, but I will say that we looked at it carefully. The reason that EPA is interested is they can't regulate the blue smoke. I guess it's harder for them to regulate the plants. They really wanted to see if municipalities could adopt this and sort of drive the demand for it. It's about $1.50 more a ton is what we understand. So there's a slightly longer cost to it. And then I think it has a longer season in terms because it's not as hot when you move it. You can work into a colder season. But yeah, the longevity was something that, again, the Tollway Authority had done some work on. They used it and municipalities are just beginning to use it locally.
Because I know during the winter months, we go to a cold patch that just really doesn't work. Doesn't last very long at all, but it gets us through the winter until we can do a proper repair.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's an area that needs more work. I certainly don't have the expertise on it, but it's one that I'm just raising as a possible solution.
Yeah. So David and Edith, I am an engineer and I don't know the answer to this, but yeah, we've been experimenting with it at the county, offering it as an option. You know, a lot of times the contractors, if IDOT and the tollway isn't doing it, it's tough to do it on a municipal project because you really need that volume. And the retrofits of the plants, I'm thinking most in the region have gone through because I think the tollway has allowed it. And I think it's a cost savings to the contractor long term. So if we're saving on greenhouse gases, they're saving on energy, and that's a cost savings to them. So a lot of what Edith said is exactly right. Especially the longer season, you can get into the colder months with a warm mix and still be able to put it down within spec and get compaction and density. So so good. Anybody else?
Hey, good afternoon, all. This is Rocco. Apologize at the beginning for my chatter, but I wanted to say, Dave, yeah. So we don't do cold patch for that reason because it just doesn't work, right? So that's what we focus on through these all the repairs, and warm mix is something that thanks Edith for calling that out. That's something that we've tried out, we tested it, it's worked, it's been proven for us. So again, it's been a great good initiative for us, and yeah, the cold patch is something that just it doesn't pay off to use it. You put it in and it pops right out with one weather event. So we've gotten completely off of doing anything with cold patch.
I bet you didn't think it was a climate solution though, did you?
That was part of our rationale on trying out warm mix. Yeah, no, that was definitely part of. We've always been trying to experiment with different types of materials from the climate perspective. So
Great.
yeah, kind of that was part of the rationale behind it.
Well, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, hi, good morning. This is Tara Orban. Just to add on to what Chris and Rocco had said, municipalities generally, they use IDOT approved mix design. So, they're the ones who set, the asphalt plants, they set up based off of what, the industry standard is. And, what little I know about it is the pavement design is a real niche area, for engineers and those in the construction industry. But what I do know is, it's not a one size fits all. So like the mix on a municipal street is not the one that the tollway is going to use, for instance. So, Edith and Jared, given the potential that, the use of this has for reduction of greenhouse gases, I do think it warrants additional evaluation in terms of how it can fit at the municipal and, just those different categories of how it will be implemented, because how each agency, how, Chris and I would use it at the county level would be different than, Rocco at the tollway. So I do think it warrants additional analysis, and there are already, groups and agencies that we can reach out to do that. And I think it would be with starting at the state.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. And I think there's other things, not to focus only on transportation and materials, but within the last year and a half in the region, maybe 2 years, IDOT, the tollway, all the collar counties, and even other state districts, we've formed a little working group where we're looking at our industry and the materials side of it. So warm mix asphalt is one of those. We had ground rubber tire. We, roofing shingles going into the mix. What's becoming on the concrete side now, something called carbon cure, which again is another energy efficiency effort. So what I'll do, Edith and Jared, is I've got your emails up here. I may put you in contact with people on our group, just to, to augment what you're already working on, especially when you're looking at an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. There might be some things we're already doing that's not being captured that might be considered maybe low-hanging fruit. So I'll send a contact that you can feel free to talk to them. They're the experts.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, that'd be tremendous. That's exactly what we were hoping to get from this meeting. I did not to throw in new information at the very end, but one thing that I skipped over in the presentation is that we're not actually currently targeting an 80% reduction for everything, because we know that it's easier to shift to move the needle on some things than others. So we are trying to hit a slightly more ambitious target for stationary energy, which is buildings. That's about 2/3 of our emissions. And transportation is closer to about 60% or so, because we think that's a more realistic target, because transportation is so closely tied to long-term decisions around development and individual preferences. So we're trying to be balanced, being realistic with making needed changes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Good information. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Jeremy from NPC. So the 80% reduction is the overall target for the plan. Are there going to be kind of concrete steps on how we back into that on a kind of year by year basis as the plan progresses?
So we do have an interim target around 2030 or so, and we're thinking about those things. We're trying to stay away from recommending specific targets, because we frankly, or rather specific projects, or too many milestones, in part because we frankly haven't done the work that would be needed to justify those things. We're trying to focus on those more process-based solutions. But we are setting a target that is, in our minds, achievable, and we're doing that because we want to make this a plan that if you implement these things, this will happen. So there's a certain modeling component that we have a team of consultants that's helping us with, where we have to show our steps, and then they test the reasonable reductions we can expect if those strategies are implemented. And then we have to back check to see if that will achieve the reductions that we're targeting. So GCOM as a framework, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, is a pretty detailed protocol. So there will be some level of fact checking and testing, but it's not a roadmap in the way that some plans might be.
If I can answer that also, Jeremy, the plan is it's quite a project to do in a year, and I don't know if anybody was paying close attention from the not-for-profit side, but the GCOM project and our selection in this process gave us technical assistance. It didn't give us any funding to do that. Both CMAP and the Mayor's Caucus had, this project came up quickly. It's just a great opportunity, and we want to make this statement. We've had tremendous support for it and a lot of interest, but the initial plan has value in raising awareness, showing the connectivity, getting climate action beyond just the city of Chicago and into the region, and setting a target. But the specificity then, both Jared and the CMAP team and the Mayor's Caucus have talked about then taking it further from there. So for us, we'll be kind of bringing it down to the municipal scale and looking at how this regional climate plan can then be implemented specifically at the municipal level. And then Jared, if you want to talk just about how that you plan to upscale a little bit into CMAP's work.
Yeah, so whenever we do this, we always talk about the fact that it's crazy to do a project of this size in 1 year. So we're not pretending that it's all done. Edith is going to do additional work with municipalities in the future. And I should say the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, not just Edith. And CMAP is looking at how we can transition from this project to do some follow-ups where we bring in some people who are focusing more at the regional scale rather. So, this is through the Global Covenant of Mayors. Edith is with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. It's going to be mostly municipal, but we know that players like IDOT and the transit agencies and WRD and the utilities all make really important decisions independent of municipalities. So we want to try to bring some people together. We haven't decided what that's going to look like yet, but we're sort of brainstorming how we can do something like that in the years to come.
And again, inviting collaboration and input as we move forward on this. If for the workshops that we've had, it's been great, but there's still lots more information and engagement that we would invite, and we hope that continues to occur.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Edith and Jared. Moving on to legislative updates. Turn it over to Jeff.
Yes, thanks, Chris. So a few updates from the federal level. Last month, we were asked by a couple of congressional offices what CMAP and partners would want to see out of potential further coronavirus relief or longer-term stimulus legislation. So we worked with a number of partners in the region to develop 5 principles, and we continue to share those with our congressional delegation as we have conversations. Just so everyone knows, those 5 are: provide fiscal relief across all levels of government with increased assistance for those most severely impacted, broad eligibility for relief funds, given the uncertainty that many potential recipients of these funds are facing, continue and increase support for transit, and then sort of longer term principles, infrastructure investments should be both timely and strategic. And then lastly, stimulus investments should support resilience and mitigate a changing climate. And so those 5 principles are available on CMAP's website under the COVID response page, and we plan to use those moving forward. As discussions about a phase 4 relief package in DC were underway, at least in the House, we reached out to our delegation to support a request that came from 2 national groups that we're a part of. So the National Association of Regional Councils and the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations asked their member organizations to sign on to and support a letter they had sent regarding the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. And so we communicated with our delegation about that. The asks were appropriate at least $20 billion in flexible transportation funds through STBG in the next relief package, that funds be suballocated to regions as they are under current law, that additional transportation funding should be eligible for use at 100% federal share, and that share serve as the non-federal match for any Title 23 or 49 program. So last Friday, the House did pass a broad relief package, as I'm sure most of you saw, the HEROES Act. It is in line with a lot of what we were looking for, but not all. So it did include significant relief for state and local governments, for highway programs and additional transit relief. It does include sub-allocation of highway funds. It includes 100% federal funding, and interestingly includes the ability to have 100% federal funding for any new obligations of existing FY20 federal highway funds, which I thought is an important thing that could be done with no additional outlay from the federal government, so potentially making it more likely to be implemented. So right now we're watching for the Senate reaction. Unlike previous phases, this House bill was not pre-negotiated with the Senate or the administration, so the path forward is largely unclear at this point. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on an item that's not exactly legislative, but that we wanted to share with this group today. So each week in CMAP's Friday email, we've been sharing information that we hope is relevant to many of our partner organizations' response to COVID. And so just a heads up that today we'll have a post about regional travel movements that really highlights the interconnectedness of the transportation system in the region. The idea being that our region doesn't work if we aren't working together. So to emphasize that point, a few stats from pre-COVID times. Most of our workers commute across county boundaries every day, over half, about 56% across a county boundary. Nearly 890,000 daily transit trips are taken to commute or for other work-related purposes. And in the central business district, transit makes up 62% of the mode share. So the takeaway here being that our region is highly interconnected and that we need to work together to ensure a strong recovery. And you can read more about this topic in today's CMAP weekly update. And that is all I have. I am happy to take any questions.
Jeff, any indication of if there's a stimulus for when we might see that come before us?
I have not gotten any good intelligence in that regard. So.
Okay. Any other questions for Jeff? No state update?
Not from me, and I think the state update is not too much known right now.
Right. Okay. All right, Jeff, I appreciate it. Okay, moving on to other business. A couple of housekeeping things. If you are a member, committee member, maybe you joined a little bit later, if you just want to make sure your attendance is recorded, let staff members know. Does anybody have any other business, new business, old business for the committee?
Actually, Chris, this is Dave Seglin. I do have a question. And I spoke to Jesse about this the other day, but I was wondering if he could just inform the rest of the committee where CMAP is on forming the safety task force that would report to this committee. You know, I believe we had brought that up, maybe it was in November or so, and I know CMAP is working on it.
Right.
Jesse? David, this is Jesse. Yeah, so I don't know if you were here for the April Transportation Committee meeting, but we did respond to that conversation that the committee had back in November. And I think what we would like to do is form what we call a resource group, so not a standing committee per se, just to try to make sure that we're able to get members from kind of across the spectrum of the 4Es, so people who are kind of non-traditional partners from outside the engineering community, and try to have a limited engagement kind of group so that we can sort of try to maximize their attendance at that group. So I am anticipating that we will, just based on the COVID crisis, be able to start this group probably in late summer. So I will be coming back around to members of this committee to talk about membership. And yeah, I'm expecting, of course, members from the city of Chicago and from nonprofit advocates, and like I said, from I guess non-traditional partners, including enforcement, education, and other groups like that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. Any other old or new business? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to that part of our meeting, public comment. So what we'll do is, do we have any public comment for staff to read into the record?
Chris, we haven't received any through email. So at this point in time, if there's anybody who wishes to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Staff will unmute you and you can proceed once you've been identified. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So at this point in time, I don't think there's any public comment.
Okay. All right. Move on to the next agenda item. Next meeting. The next meeting will be June 26th. So with that, I wish everybody a nice Memorial Day weekend. Stay healthy and safe. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Tom Rickard, so moved.
Thank you, Tom. Second.
Jackie Forbes, so moved. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody want to just,
Aye.
or any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. And again, have a nice, enjoy the long weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Chris.
Good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.